Hello, tag team, back again. Party on, party people. Let's begin. All right, it's not really beginning. It's part 3. Um, so it's probably going to be 4 parts because it's kind of a long PowerPoint. I'm sorry about that. Um, if we end up buying this software, I can make one long video and you can pause it. But maybe you like these little short ones. I'm gonna post a survey for you guys to respond to by Tuesday night. I think they want you to respond because we have to report to the powers that be to make sure you guys have all logged on and are connecting with the class and with me. So I'm going to have a little Google survey real quick. No big deal. I'll give you some points so you can tell me what you think about how we're running things. So back to FDR. So we call the first part of his term the first 100 days. And he is passing whole or submitting, or we're passing legislation. Congress passes the legislation, obviously. But his brain trust and he are proposing legislation, and they're passing all kinds of things with the focus on rebuilding the industrial and agricultural sectors. The focus isn't really on people as individuals yet. To some extent, but not in the way that it will later on, right? Because remember, there's that whole bootstrap kind of ideology based, that Protestant work ethic that we talked about. Remember, we talked about Horatio Alger. Did we talk about that, or was that FCC? Now I'm having a brain. Oh, well, anyway. At any rate, the people are seen as, they need to be responsible for themselves. So that's not the first priority. Okay. So like I was saying in the last video, there's 3 kinds of legislation: relief, recovery, and reform. All right. So relief legislation, like I said, is to stop the bleeding, put a Band-Aid on it. It's the immediate problem-solving strategy. Throw money at the problem is basically what usually happens. We have thousands upon thousands of teenagers, mostly boys, but not always boys, who are kicked out of their homes because their parents can no longer afford them. And, they are in gangs, basically hopping on trains and riding across the country, what they call riding the rails. They were hobos. And, imagine having a population of thousands of, aimless men wandering around. They're starving, they're angry. So that's one of the problems they're going to solve right away. So recovery legislation are temporary projects to help people and to help the economy. So job type programs. So one of the things that he did was he honored, the skills that people had. So writers, right? A writer is out of work. What kind of job are you going to give them? So one of the jobs that was created was collecting slave narratives. So writers, out-of-work writers, were hired by the government to go around and interview former slaves and get their testimony. And you can read that testimony on the Library of Congress today. It's all there, the slave narratives as a result of the Great Depression. We also had people that were sent to make recipe books and take pictures. So you could be utilized in what you're an expert at. It's more than just, well, you don't have a job, go work at McDonald's. It was a job that had dignity, and that was really important. And then reform is the long-term strategy to make sure this doesn't happen again, right? And to prevent this kind of economic crash. Now, obviously, you're not going to find a partner, which is sad. Although Anna and Ava, you guys can partner up if you want to. But otherwise, I'm assuming most of you are practicing good social distancing and not being near each other, okay? Which is sad, but, we'll get through. So, those group of roving men that I was talking about, Civilian Conservation Corps, the CCC, and this gives men jobs, basically young men. They build national parks, they build roads, they reforest. In fact, if you go to the Catoctin parks here, you'll see the shelters that are built by the CCC. And even now you can be hired in the summertime for something called the YCCC, the Youth Civil Conservation Corps, to help repair those structures and things. But that was, they got money for doing it. And usually they had enough money to keep and some to send home to their families. They got housing in bunkhouses, and they got food, and they had something to do. So it got them off the streets and off the railroads. It's good. The FERA, Federal Emergency Relief Administration, gave grants, which is money you don't generally have to pay back, to states and local associations, local governments, so that they could solve the problems within their own communities, because nobody knows better what the problems are than the people in charge there, right? So that was a great relief. And that's the role of federal government, right? It's to support the state governments. Agricultural Adjustment Act, the AAA, is still in effect in some places. Now, unfortunately, now it's been sort of modified, and it tends to help large-scale industrial farms and not, farmers like down the street here in Thurmont, which is problematic. But this is going to establish prices, fair shipping costs. Remember, we've been talking about those dang railroads for all this time, and give farmers the help they need to recover, right? And it's also going to kind of an interesting program where you're paid not to grow something, so that we don't have surpluses of a product to drop the price. So like right now, we have a lot of soybeans in storage because we traditionally sell most of our soybean crop to China. And with the tariff issues that we've been having with China, with the president, China said, well, to heck with you. We're not buying your soybeans. So now all those farmers across the country who have been growing soybeans to sell to the Chinese market have nowhere to sell their soybeans to. And so the value of those soybeans has dropped precipitously because there's no one buying it, right? It's the opposite of toilet paper right now. Toilet paper is $10 for a 6-pack because everybody wants it and there isn't any to be had. All right. So here's a poster for the Civil Conservation Corps, and here's a photograph of some young men doing the things that young men do, clowning around. Look, there's even a dog. Hello, little dog. Right? So there you go. And all these images that I'm using in here are from the Library of Congress. So so an artist was hired to paint this poster, use their skills in a way that was meaningful. There you go. There it is. The Works Progress Administration Art Project, Chicago, 1935, WPA. All right. The Tennessee Valley Authority, the TVA, was designed primarily to give electricity to the Tennessee Valley because it's one of the rural areas that didn't have electricity from before. So that's primarily what that's for. And then the National Industrial Recovery Act, which is the NRA, not the gun NRA, the National Recovery Administration, which regulated pricing and output and manufacturing, basically, to make sure we don't have too much and we're not selling it and the economy's crash again. And then the PWA, the Public Works Administration, that gives people jobs. It's called, one of the slang terms was boondoggling, like you're making up jobs for people to do so that you can pay them. And so like making parks and planting trees, because it makes our communities better, right? It gives unemployed people a job, but then those people spend the money and put it back into the economy, right? So it's funny because we do this like on a small scale, but eventually that's what we're going to do on a large scale. That will be the Marshall Plan after World War II. We're going to pump money into Europe to keep their economies afloat. We'll obviously talk about that in a couple of weeks, not today, but it's the same idea, basically. All right, so here's some pictures of some electricity happening in a dam, a hydroelectric dam, again, from the Library of Congress. All right, now, obviously, politics are politics, and not everybody's going to like FDR, and that's fine. You don't have to like him. But they hold FDR responsible for, the reduction of personal liberty. So the idea that the government is stepping in. But in some of those instances, when you think about Social Security, now, in my personal opinion, Social Security is the most transformative legislation that FDR passed, right? That's signed into law. And that is that, once you reach retirement age, or I think it's 62. I don't know. I'm not close enough yet to have it all nailed down for myself. But you are guaranteed a small but supposedly livable income into your old age. Because we had the Depression happen, people lost everything. They lost their savings if they had it, and they don't have access. They lost their homes. So if you had a home that had been in your family and been paid off, it was gone. Because you couldn't pay the taxes, right? You still got to pay the taxes, even if you own it. There's a guy called Father Coughlin, and he's a piece of work. If you're interested, you can listen to some of his speeches on YouTube, but I think he liked Hitler a little bit better than he did FDR. He was very anti-Semitic, said kind of horrific, not even kind of, really horrific things about Jewish people. Ooh, boy. Anyway, Huey Long is someone that was a political opponent to FDR, but FDR uses him to his advantage in like political campaigns and things like that. So he actually ends up working for FDR, which is kind of neat. But he gets killed. We still have labor problems. Now, Roosevelt's a big proponent of unions, but a lot of, industries weren't allowed to unionize. Even now, that's still an issue. So when we think about like people who work at Walmart, millions of people probably thinking about how many Walmarts there are. They even have them in China and Canada and all over the world. They're not allowed to unionize. And if you are heard or thought to be unionizing or trying to bring a union in, they get rid of you. That's a fireable offense, right? And so that was the case in a lot of industries then too. All right, so the second 100 days, the second section of time that we use to delineate the New Deal, this is where he starts to shift to meeting the needs of people, right? So this is where we figure out about helping people who are old and infirm, taking care of the least capable among us, the sick, the needy. So, then before Social Security, if you got injured on the job or you were permanently disfigured and disabled, like you couldn't work any longer, like there's nothing in place for you. But Social Security is now an option. You pay into it every paycheck you get, no matter if you're 14, 15, all the way up till you retire. A portion of your paycheck goes into Social Security. You pay into it, and then when you are of a correct age, if you live that long, you draw that money out. Now, if you're disabled, permanently disabled that you can't work, then you are able to use Social Security to make sure that you don't end up living on the street, right? That's the goal, is like, a society is only as good as the way the weakest among us are treated. So if your people are homeless and not able to walk, let alone work, then what are you doing with yourself as a nation, right? That's the idea. So he wants to change this, and we have Social Security. They try to bring houses up to standard. Think about all those tenements and things like that in the inner city. Everything was breaking down. And they boondoggle. They create jobs for people. Right, so this is the part they're trying to stabilize the economy in the first 100 days, and then the second 100 days they're trying to stabilize society, if that makes sense. Oh, I'm out of time. All right, dang, I like to talk a lot about FDR. All right, I'll see you in part 4.